Good evening. How's it going? It's now Thursday night at, well, wherever you are, it's somewhere in the world, it's in the midnight hour. So, wanted to talk to you tonight. Again, my name is Thomas Steves, and this is Midnight in the Valley. This is a hour-long talk, kind of a radio kind of talk program. If you want to chime in, if you're watching this program by any chance, you can always enter into the chat. And so I talk about life from a Gen X standpoint, from observations of somebody who's, you know, in that mid zone, in between the baby boomers and the millennials. We're kind of the lost generation. So, continuing on with the discussions that I've been building up through from my very first one of love to this point, as I've said in previous broadcasts, that each talk I'm giving builds on the themes of the previous. And you'll all see kind of a connective tissue happen as I work through these issues. You'll see kind of recurrent themes pop up through each of these talks that I'm giving. And so, what I wanted to talk with you about tonight is kind of, an issue of communication, legacy, and whatnot. It's the issue of conflict, the issue of uncomfortableness in life and dealing with things. So the first question I have to ask is, what is conflict? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? What is conflict? And as I said in past talks, and as you'll see in my approach, that I use movies and pop culture that we all listen to and our age range is uh, focused on and familiar with. I'm going to play a little quote from a movie. It's a movie that came out in 1976. Uh, I saw it in the theater as a kid, and it stuck with me. I was 3 years old, and it still just resonated with me to this day. And you'll find that this movie is appropriate even more today than when it came out, almost 50 years ago.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!" I want you to get up right now.
That is from a film called Network, 1976. Was it Howard Beach? Is that the character's name? I think that was his name. Peter Finch played the role of that character, and he's a newscaster. And he's going through a midlife crisis in the midst of the media age that is burgeoning in uh, the 70s and kind of where society is going. And he uses that platform to induce a sort of conflict within himself. He's struggling through things. And this whole monologue is, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And the idea is he had some internal conflict going because he was dealing with external conflicts. So, what is conflict? All conflict is a resistance to the forward motion of something else. Whether it's a thought being put forward, resistance is something that is met with, it comes in conflict with a juxtaposition of a stance. So you have conflict moving you have an idea, an agenda, some sort of force moving in one direction, and it's met with resistance pushing back. That is the nature of conflict. It's the resistance to goals and objectives. It's like a barrier. A barrier is a conflict. Um, and there are different types of conflict. There's internal. You ever heard the term I'm conflicted about this? It means I have emotions that are confused. I have conflicting emotions. I should feel one way, but I feel another way, and I don't know which way to go in terms of how to respond to something. So I've got an internal conflict happening with me about a situation I'm dealing with. Then you have external conflict. There is something I want to experience, I want to do, I want to express, and I'm being met with resistance from outside sources, be it, something at my workplace, a boss telling me, no, you can't do that. In relationships, conflict is about, you know, two people with two different sets of dreams and goals and perspectives trying to work together, but their wants and desires and their perspectives clash with each other and create this conflict. You have political conflict. We see it all and around in our world, from the right, from the left. Um, Join our party. Join this party's bad. So you see people with different ideologies in conflict with each other. You see it in advertising. You see, again, political advertising is one that's huge. Uh, this person, our group is right. This person's bad. They are the enemy. They are in conflict with what we want. Vote our way and demonize them. So conflict comes in all these different shapes and sizes. And, using movie references, they're one of the films that I grew up on or came out in the 70s also, and I've loved every movie. There's only one that really was really subpar, but the franchise itself plus the continuations is the Rocky series with Sylvester Stallone. The whole movie is it's about a boxer. What does a boxer do in the ring? They're in conflict. Two people fighting. So the movie deals with the conflict with the villain or the opposition in the literal sense, but then you have conflict happening internally with that character. With the Rocky Balboa character, he's got his own internal conflicts. He's self doubt in one of the movies. I believe that uh, was it the Eye of the Tiger, which was um, with Clubber Lang, Mr. T. That was Rocky 3. Where he can't beat him, and then you had his whole self doubt about getting the Eye of the Tiger, and then you have the fourth film where he goes against Ivan Drago, who ends up killing Apollo Creed, and that all sets up and him trying to understand about the differences in people. Then you had another movie that came out, almost 30 years ago now, Michael Douglas. This one created a lot of controversy when it came out. It was called Falling Down, and it's about Michael Douglas, a person in his 50s, late 40s, early 50s. The tagline for the movie is "A man at war with the everyday world." And it's about a guy whose day just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. and it's about how he responds to all the hypocrisy he sees, all the problems in the world, and all of his this internal and external conflict he's dealing with. And it's a violent movie. And that movie brings a lot of debate up because, on one level, it speaks about a lot of truth about what we're seeing in our world, the conflicts that arise, the hypocrisy, the injustice on one end. It exposes that and makes people really uncomfortable because we all see it, but we don't want to deal with that type of conflict. We just want to kind of ignore it and say, oh, there. But then the film also deals with his response to those injustices. And what you see is the movie, on one hand, shows all this issue over here, but then also highlights the issue that his response is what we sometimes feel in our head that we want to do to respond to the injustice over here. But it also brings up the idea of an eye for an eye. There's an old saying, if you go through life with an eye for an eye mentality, at one point the whole world will be blind. His approach to the injustices that he saw in the world, in order for him to deal with it, was also creating more problems. He was handling conflict with equal and opposite adverse conflict resolution. Then you have a song, and I posted again, like I said, I've always posted all the links to all the media in my description on this video. Song by Kenny Rogers called Coward of the County. And let me bring up the lyrics for a minute. And it's a song that basically is about a young man who learns from his father that his father had died in prison when he was 10 years old. And his father basically says, his father died because he was a rebeler, he was a fighter, he lived life on the rough and tumble. And he told him, don't fight, be a peacemaker, don't do what I've done. So he was teaching his son to be a pacifist. And the son, in his attempt to be a peacemaker and a pacifist, by the same token, grew up being considered the coward of the county. Every time there was a conflict, he'd run. He wouldn't stand up. And the song goes on at one point that his girlfriend ends up basically violated, quote unquote, raped, and taken advantage of by these group of guys. And so the whole conflict of internally, he's trying to deal with the internal conflict of his his situation, and he doesn't want to be a fighter. He doesn't want to deal with this, but then he also realizes if he doesn't, he will not stand up for honor. So the whole internal conflict that he's dealing with, juxtaposed to the external conflict, he ends up basically confronting the guys and beating them up and taking them out to protect his girl's honor for what they had done. So you had a juxtaposition of two types of conflict happening, an internal and external happening. And so In doing that, you know, there's actually 2 other songs or a song in a movie I wanna bring up, one more. Um, song called, or a movie called Life is a House. Kevin, Kline, if you haven't seen it, the setup is Kevin Kline is divorced. He's, estranged from his son. His ex-wife has moved on, she's married and whatnot. The son's got a lot of problems. Kevin Kline is dying of cancer, no one knows. So he knows that he doesn't have a lot of time left. So he's got these internal conflict issues that he's dealing with, and he's trying to reconnect with his son, and he's trying to make everything right. And the movie is talks about conflict between parents and children, ex-spouses, spouses in general, and how to work with those issues. It's a phenomenal film, and there's this scene um, that always struck with me because I'm going to be honest with you. My dad and I had a lot of conflict for a time when I moved with him. My dad uh, was a certain type of gentleman who didn't let you see uh, who he really was a lot of times. He kept things at arm's distance. And in doing that, I never got to know a certain depth of him except on some key moments. And so it created a wall of distance between us and it created a lot of conflict. Now that my father's passed away, now that I'm a father myself, and I see the world through a father's eyes, there are certain things that I'm like, I get it now. I see things a little differently. It's taught me a little bit more about grace with my past. Um, and so in doing so, I learned, like that movie deals with a scene where Kevin Kline's trying to connect with his son by relaying a story about how he struggled with his father. And so that movie deals with the conflict in relationships. And then kind of another one that's similar, and you'll know it, is A Boy Named Sue, about a father-son relationship and a boy who was named a certain way and how that impacted his life and the anger he had. But he saw as time went on why he was named the way he was. So what are the motivators for conflict? What is it that propels conflict? A lot of different reasons. If we're focused on something we want in life, but what we want comes in direct contrast to something somebody else wants, you're going to get resistance. And I'm not saying which side is right or wrong. I'm just talking about the dynamic itself. Your want and your desire may actually cause problems with somebody else's wants and desires. And then, so you'll have two people interlocked into this tug of war, this power play, this battle of wills, this conflict to see who wins out. That's the adversarial nature of certain types of conflict, depending on the personality types of the players involved. Where it's about dominance. Now, you have other types of conflict that can be positive. Working out, resistance training. Resistance is the idea is the more push-ups you do, the more pull-ups you do with weight, the more weight that's added to you and gives you resistance. What it does is it strengthens you. It builds up your body. So the conflict, the resistance you're getting is making you stronger in a healthy, positive way. Certain conflict doesn't make you stronger. It actually makes you weaker because if everything is a battle to you, You don't learn other ways of dealing with people and dealing with life. You're kind of stuck in your paradigm. And so that idea of conflict is, it can be good or bad. It all depends on the motivation behind why the conflict is there. I used to teach speech and debate, and I would tell people, you know, in this day and age, we've lost the differences. There's three types of sharing information, and I should have mentioned this on communication, but I'll bring it up here. You have discussion, you have arguing, and you have debating. When I ask people what's the difference between arguing and debating, a lot of times they can't give me the answer. They think they're the same thing. Oh, arguing is debating. We're hashing things out. And I go, no, 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 no. Discussion is just like brainstorming, sharing of ideas back and forth. There's no conflict happening. It's just everything's out there about information sharing and building upon this data pool of information being offered forth. You're building the pile in front of you of data that everyone can sift through and ponder. Debate is the idea of bringing an idea out and having somebody offer an opposing idea for the purpose of testing the validity of the ideas of both sides to find potentially an ultimate truth. Um, and debate a lot of times can work hand in hand with negotiation. Negotiation is a form of conflict resolution. Debate, in a way, is a form of conflict resolution. It's the idea of two parties, not out of anger, out of animosity towards one another, testing the validity of something, trying to find the ultimate truth, and trying to find an enlightened ground where an ultimate truth is established or everybody kind of benefits from this, but you're trying to achieve an ideal. The last form is argumentation. Argumentation has nothing but adversarial motives behind it. It's propelled in anger, it's propelled in conquest. The sole purpose of arguing is to dominate by any means necessary. And the thing about arguing in conflict is it's predominantly emotion led. The emotions inside of you seeping out to attack verbally that which you are threatened by, you find not agreeable. And so what you do is you argue back and forth in the idea of subduing, getting rid of, or just eradicating in one form or another by any means necessary. So in arguing, you find a lot of name calling, character assassinations, mockery, um, a change in tone, very accusatory language, profanity, a lot of back and forth. I used to refer to it, and you see this in relationships a lot, marriage and dating that are unhealthy. You'll see what's known as the insanity tennis match. I've thrown out something that you don't like, and what are you going to do? You're going to throw it right back, and then I'm going to throw it right back, and it just never ends. And unhealthy relationships are centered on that type of conflict. It's called the insanity tennis match. And some people cannot self regulate. They don't have the discipline and the internal fortitude, the internal awareness to realize what they're doing. And it's just so hardwired into them. So they operate on that level of conflict. It's what is so ingrained in them of problem solving. Um, I earlier this year, well, let me start back. I'm a bulldog. People who know me know that I'm very passionate, and because of how I was raised, I've had to be a fighter in a lot of ways, and I've had to fight for survival. And so, in doing that, in fighting for survival, I've had to I become very abrasive, and I was trying to protect myself. Survival mode is when you're really trying to protect yourself. You're from outgoing threats. So everything is confrontational or has the ability to be. But it gets tiring after a while. And you alienate a lot of people, whether you mean to or not. Some people that you're dealing with are just like you, and so they're alienating you, blah, 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 blah. And it just doesn't bring about healthiness. So over the last 20 years, I've been really focusing on trying to be selective in what I argue or not argue or debate about, or what battles I choose to be in, what conflicts I choose to engage in. Somebody said to me a while ago, he goes, you just let a lot of things roll off your back that I'd go into fight. And I said, well, because I've had the chance to look at certain things and see, wait a minute, it's not really worth my time. What do I get from engaging in that type of a conflict? Well, you can win. I said, win what? What's the spoil of war other than bragging rights? What does it gain me? Nothing. A waste of time, stress, and negativity. I don't want that in my life. But some people, that's how they operate. They can't get out of that paradigm. So earlier this year, and I've been reading a lot of books on this issue and on negotiation tactics, where there's a guy by the name of Chris Voss, uh, the Black Swan Group, and he is a former FBI hostage negotiator. And he started this whole. That's what he would do is he'd basically deal with life and death situations, negotiating hostage releases. And he took his years of background and he put it into using those techniques in every aspect of life. And so I've been really reading about this. I've been really trying to understand his approach. And I had a situation earlier this year that could have been, amongst a lot of the other hardships that I've been going through, could have been even more catastrophic, because this somebody was approaching me in a very, very adversarial nature, uh, that to bully me, that could have had life changing uh, consequences. And their goal was to bully me. But I just slowed things down, followed some of these ideas of conflict of negotiation tactics, and slowly but surely, so far, I've been able to diffuse any sort of fuel this adversarial person has had against me. When I started to uncover some things about them and I slowed it down and was very methodical in my approach of how I dealt with them, I basically turned the tables on them to show them that the bullying tactic isn't going to work and they're just going to have to run themselves rampant. And so far, it seems to have worked, that they've backed off and left me alone, because and they're looking for other people to bully. Um, Earlier this year, I got certified through a state program called, I think it's DARPA. What is it? Uh, the Dispute Resolution Act of 1986. I got certified as a conflict resolution and mediation uh, specialist, with the goal of hopefully at some point working with local courts to help people resolve their conflicts before they go into a court of law and go through mediation. And the idea is, in a court of law, and I'll go a little bit on politics here. In a court of law, it's an adversarial environment. It's conflict producing, conflict oriented. Two parties walking into that room who have no desire to negotiate. So they are pleading their case, building their case in front of a judge and a jury to let an independent third party decide the fate, because they themselves have decided that they don't want to negotiate. They don't want to find a common ground. They have an adversarial attitude in this, and that's their approach. So the courts, that's how they make their money. That the courts stay in business by promoting lack of resolution. The courts make a lot of money on the longer a case goes out, the more lawyers who can fight and do this and that. It's a whole industry of based on conflict, on adversarial nature, honestly, bringing out the worst in people. Because the parties don't want to talk. They don't want to work out their problems. They want somebody to be a winner and somebody to be a loser. Um, and so now, if you think about this, lawyers are paid to fight. They're not paid to decide. They're not paid to negotiate. They're paid to fight for their client's best interest. And they will fight as long as they have something to fight with and some argument to be had until somebody else decides, you know, that the fight's done. Then they can do an appeal and whatnot. Now, if your whole career is not about negotiation, but it's about being argumentative, it's about being adversarial, you'll carry that attitude with you outside of the courtroom into your relationships, into your understanding of business. A lot of these lawyers end up becoming judges. And these judges have a very adversarial nature themselves about dominance and control. And a lot of times those judges move on to become politicians. Lawyers become politicians. And politicians are meant to solve problems, meant to keep things in order, to help things run efficiently. But if you've got somebody occupying the seat of governance whose inherent nature is adversarial, who makes a career off of conflict, remember, if there's no one fighting, a lawyer has no employment, has no money coming in. As long as there's people fighting, that lawyer has an income, has a career. So these lawyers move into politics, a job meant to solve problems being overseen by somebody who's paid to create problems and argue those problems. If you look at society today, are we closer to being a uh, cohesive society with problems being solved? are more problems being created. If you look at our government, look at how much fighting is going on because that's what they do. They're lawyers. They're paid to argue. They're not leaders. So our government is adversarial by nature, and it's not going to be something that's going to help our society. That's where you and I, and that's what like we become the peacemakers. We become the problem solvers so that we realize the courts can't solve the problems. We realize the government can't solve the problems. We need to learn conflict resolution, ways to come to the table to work together. Some people you can't. They're just so stuck in their paradigm. They conquest. That's what they do. So in terms of that, so yeah, so I got a certification. So that's something in this stage of my life I'm really trying to work about, finding conflict resolution, finding mediation, finding ways to come to resolution without being adversarial. Some people are not that way, and you just, you have to move on with people who are of your same ilk. Now, what are the benefits of conflict? Any benefits? If you are met with resistance, maybe that resistance is good in that whoever's giving you resistance can see something you might not be able to see. It's kind of like if you want to walk across the street willy-nilly and just say, I'm going to walk across the street, and somebody's saying no, and they grab you and pull you back because they see a bus that's coming down the street and going to hit you. I knew somebody one time. I was walking across the street. We were walking across the street, four-way intersection. This person, we had a crosswalk. The crosswalk said red. Don't walk. This person said, screw it. I'm going to walk. And I'm like, you can't. They're like, no, I have the right of way. I'm in a crosswalk. The traffic will have to stop for me. And they proceeded to walk across. And I was just like, that's arrogant, dangerous, and arrogant. They didn't care about anything else happening around it. All they cared about was their agenda. That they created. So obviously, and I knew this person, they had their own internal conflicts going on, but they were creating conflict for everyone else around them, potentially dangerous conflict, because they believed that the rules didn't apply to them, that they could make up their own rules. And this is kind of this person's personality. So conflict, when done properly, can help you to grow. There's an old saying that a good sea captain never became a good sea captain on a calm sea. It's the strife on the sea, the conflicts, the waves that make a good sea captain a good sea captain. They know how to work and navigate those situations. A good sea captain is not a sea captain who stays connected to the dock, afraid of risk, afraid of conflict, afraid of hardship. There are some people who are risk adverse and conflict adverse, and they will do everything they can to stay away from conflict whatsoever. They will just run for the hills. But they don't understand because they don't like conflict. They don't like being challenged. But if you really look at their personalities, they don't like being challenged because they want control. And by running away from conflict or being questioned on what they do, they end up controlling the neighborhood. So it's a passive aggressive way of controlling your environment, but it also is a personality trait that shows a stunted developmental nature. Why? Because you don't allow opposition to you, so you don't understand about relational development, conflict resolution, negotiation. And so the negatives of conflict is destruction, fear, avoidance, lack of interpersonal skill development. There are some people, again, who are so avoidant of conflict that they end up creating conflict. They end up creating the very thing they don't want, but it's a conflict they can control. And it just shows a kind of an undeveloped thought process. So, in terms of conflict in general, as a generalized concept, conflict is a neutral. It's just an occurrence. We live in a fallen world. We live in a broken world. We live in a world that's not imperfect. Not everybody thinks the same. Not everybody is the same. And thank God, because it's that conflict, that those differences that help shape us and mold us. I bought my daughter for at one point. I bought her a National Geographic rock tumbler. There was a time when she was really into rock tumbling. So I looked at the idea of rock tumbling. You take these rocks and they're all jagged and whatnot, and you put them in they've got their own hard personalities. But if you put two different types of rocks in this, so you put a like granite and a sandstone, two different densities, when you put them in the rock tumbler, the granite is going to destroy and decimate the sandstone. It's just going to obliterate it. It's going to turn it to dust. And so you have two different types of materials, two different strengths. And you if you find rocks of a similar make, there's a thing in the Bible that says iron as iron sharpens iron, so does one person sharpen another. When two pieces of metal hit each other to sharpen each other, you see like Benihana's Ginsu knives doing all that stuff, the sparks fly and metal flies off. That conflict, that iron sharpening iron actually creates two very sharp, very effective tools when the process is done. But it's not painless. There's sparks flying, there's metal flying, there's combat. Some people just don't like that. And they don't like the uncomfortable nature, but they don't understand that the uncomfortable nature is what makes them grow. So in a rock tumbler, when you have two rocks over time as they're bouncing each other in this cylinder, and you put in water and you put in a certain amount of grit, and you keep changing it over time, and you change the slowness of it and the duration. By the end of the process, what you'll see is two rocks that are roughly still the same size, but all of those rough edges are gone. They've allowed themselves to be in conflict, in healthy conflict, and it's made these smooth, polished, beautiful looking rocks. That's what healthy conflict does to us. It makes us a better version of ourselves, makes us more approachable in a broken world. I have had friends come in and out of my life. I've had some adversarial friendships end on bad terms. And as time I had a situation today. Somebody I hadn't heard from in 7 years, maybe. We had a falling out, and I was brutally honest. I said what I said. This person got very mad at me because what I said was a truth that was a threat to them. I didn't mean it as a truth to be a threat. But I didn't show wisdom in my application of saying it. And through another associate, we got reconnected. And I still remember it, but I had a choice when this person reached out to me. And I was like, when I first got, I was like, oh, okay, where do I go with this? Like, all right. The person reached out to me, was very nice, and talked in general terms about the last time we fell out. And he kind of threw a generalized apology out there. And I had a real choice. Do I hold the grudge? Say, no, I don't want to be a part of it? Or to say, you know what? Let bygones be got bygones. Hey, it is what it is. Don't worry about it. How can I help you? What can we do? Let's take care of your issue. I'll help you out. And the person was like, really? And I go, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. Hey, it's water under the bridge. Let's move on. And so there's a cool, you know, uh, reconnection there. And this happened to me about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago now too. Similar situation. Somebody else I had the conflict with. We all parted ways. Been years, and I reached out to this person. They reached to me, and I forgot, and we reconnected. And I'm just like, it is what it is, dude. Let it go. It's fine. No big issue. Some things it's like, let the conflict go. Learn to be a peacemaker. And so that's kind of my lesson and kind of my thought for tonight is about don't shy away from conflict. Don't run from it. Conflict is good, but learn how to work with conflict in a healthy fashion. Be a negotiator, be a peacemaker as best as you can. You can't control the other person, but you can learn to work your magic on your side of the equation. Try not to be argumentative and conquest oriented. Try to be negotiation oriented, conflict resolution oriented. You'll develop who you are as a person. You'll be able to fluctuate better in different groups. I'm going to be 50 years old and I'm just really starting to embrace this now at this. I wish I would have embraced it earlier, but it just wasn't part of my personality. I wasn't ready to learn those lessons. So that's just kind of where I wanted to go with tonight. I'm ending a little early. We're, about 50 minutes and change. But that's just what I wanted to share with you about conflict, about what types of conflict, what's healthy conflict, what is not healthy conflict, and understanding where you are on the spectrum of how you handle conflict. Are you somebody who generates conflict and strife? Or are you somebody who tries to be a peacemaker and a healthy peacemaker? Are you somebody who creates strife wherever you go? Or you create peace as much as you can? And are all points in between. So anyway, so thank you for being with me tonight. Hope this message finds you all well. Please leave comments if you read this and decide to join in. And subscribe if you can and share my page along. Have a great night, and I'll catch you later.